I want a divorce, Elizabeth. Daniel's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth I had once known. 40 years of marriage, and it had come to this. I looked at him, his face illuminated by the flickering light above us. Why, Daniel? After all these years, why now? He avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed on the divorce papers he had nonchalantly placed on the table. I've met someone else, he said bluntly. Someone younger, more vibrant. The word vibrant stung me. Wasn't I vibrant enough when I was juggling jobs to pay our bills? Wasn't I vibrant when I nursed his ailing father, our child clinging to my skirt? I wanted to scream, to let out the frustration that had been building up for years. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and asked, "And what about me, Daniel? What about what I want?" "What you want," he scoffed. "You should have thought about that before becoming so complacent." Complacent. The word hit me like a slap. All those years of putting his needs above mine, of sacrificing my dreams for our family, and this was how he saw me. I felt a tear trickle down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. "Fine, Daniel," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If that's what you want, but I won't go quietly. I deserve more than this, and I will fight for what is rightfully mine." He looked at me then, his expression a mix of surprise and disdain. "You think you can take me on? Go ahead, try, but you'll get nothing from me." I knew this wouldn't be easy. Daniel had always been stubborn, set in his ways, but so was I. And for the first time in 40 years, I was ready to fight back. As I left the kitchen, the papers still lying untouched on the table, I realized that this was not the end of my story. It was just the beginning. A beginning where I could finally be me, Elizabeth Hartman, not just Daniel's wife. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside. I looked up at the stars, a sense of freedom slowly seeping into my bones. Yes, this was just the beginning, and I was ready for whatever lay ahead. I sat by the window of my modest apartment, a cup of lukewarm tea in my hands, gazing into the past. The early days with Daniel seemed like a different life, a different Elizabeth. Back then I was Elizabeth Martin, full of dreams and aspirations. We met at a friend's party, a casual encounter that blossomed into something more. Daniel was charming, his laughter infectious. I was captivated, believing we could build a wonderful life together. I was 24, he was 29, and the world seemed full of possibilities. Our wedding was a simple affair, but it was ours, and that made it perfect. We moved into a small apartment, our first home, filled with love and laughter. But the laughter soon faded, replaced by the harsh realities of life. Daniel's job was never stable. He drifted from one position to another, his salary barely covering his personal expenses. It fell on me to bear the financial burden. I took up a job as an administrative assistant, working long hours to ensure our bills were paid. "You're late again, Elizabeth," Daniel would complain as I walked in, exhausted. "I'm hungry." "There's food in the fridge," I'd reply, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I'm not your roommate, Elizabeth. I'm your husband. You should take care of me," he'd retort, his words like daggers to my heart. I remember one particularly grueling day when I came home to find the apartment in disarray. "Why haven't you cleaned up?" I asked, struggling to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Cleaning? That's a woman's job, isn't it?" Daniel replied nonchalantly, not even looking up from the TV. I felt a surge of anger, but suppressed it. This was my husband, the man I had vowed to love and cherish. But as the days turned into months and the months into years, that love was tested, strained to its limits by his constant disregard and entitlement. I often lay awake at night, wondering if this was all life had to offer. Was I destined to spend my days catering to a man who saw me not as a partner but as a convenience? As I sipped my tea, the bitter taste mingling with my bitter memories, I realized that those early years were not just about financial struggles. They were about losing myself, piece by piece, to a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. But now, as I sat alone, I felt a flicker of hope. I had a chance to reclaim those lost pieces, to find the Elizabeth who had dreams and aspirations. It was time to rediscover myself, away from the shadow of Daniel Hartman. The years rolled on, each one like a wave eroding the shore of my self-worth. I remember the day we moved into Daniel's father's house. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, a way to save money, but it became a permanent fixture of our lives, a testament to the sacrifices I made for the family. Daniel's father, Robert, was a stern man, He had never approved of me, seeing me as an inadequate match for his son. Living under his roof only intensified his disdain. "A woman's place is in the home," he'd often say, casting a critical eye over my work attire. I tried to juggle my job and my responsibilities at home, but it was never enough. Daniel's expectations grew, his criticisms sharper. Why is dinner always late? Why is the house never clean? The questions were like lashes, each one leaving a mark. When our daughter Emily was born, the joy of motherhood was overshadowed by the mounting pressures. I remember holding her in my arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and wondering how I would manage. Daniel's contribution to parenting was minimal, leaving me to balance work, home, and a newborn. The years with Robert were challenging. His health began to decline, and the responsibility of his care fell to me. Daniel's excuses were always the same. "I'm too busy with work," or "I don't know how to take care of him." I remember one evening after a particularly grueling day, I sat beside Robert's bed, feeding him his dinner. His hands trembled as he tried to grasp the spoon, his pride warring with his frailty. "Thank you, Elizabeth," he murmured, a rare moment of kindness in our strained relationship. It was in these small moments that I found the strength to continue. But the burden was heavy, a weight that pressed down on me, squeezing the joy out of my life. As Emily grew, she became my beacon of hope, her laughter a balm to my weary soul. I watched her play, her innocence a stark contrast to the complexities of my life. I wanted more for her, more than the life I'd accepted. The realization hit me one day as I sat in the office, my mind wandering from the spreadsheet on my screen. I was more than just Daniel's wife, more than Robert's caretaker. I was Elizabeth Hartman, and I deserved to be seen, to be heard. But it would take years and a crumbling marriage for me to finally act on that realization. Years of sacrifice, of putting others before myself. It was time to change that narrative, to take control of my own story. As the years passed, the walls of our home felt like they were closing in on me, each day a repeat of the last, filled with unending responsibilities and a deepening sense of loneliness. Daniel's indifference to our family's needs grew, his presence at home becoming more like that of a distant lodger than a husband or father. It was a crisp autumn evening when I felt the first real stirrings of rebellion. I had just finished clearing the dinner table, the remnants of a meal eaten mostly in silence. Daniel had spent the evening as he usually did, buried in the newspaper or glued to the television, oblivious to the world around him. "Daniel, we need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his expression one of mild annoyance. "What now, Elizabeth? I'm tired." "It's about us, about our marriage," I said, finding strength in my resolve. "Our marriage is fine," he replied dismissively, turning his attention back to the TV. "No, it's not fine. It hasn't been fine for a long time," I countered, feeling a surge of frustration. He sighed, setting down the remote. "What do you want from me, Elizabeth? I want you to see me, to hear me. I'm not just a caretaker or a maid. I'm your wife, and I'm unhappy." There was a long silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice devoid of empathy. "If you're unhappy, maybe you should do something about it. Change your job, find a hobby. Don't put it on me." I felt a sharp sting of pain, realizing that the man I had married, the man I had loved, was no longer there. In his place was a stranger, someone who saw me not as a partner but as a convenience. The days that followed were a blur of introspection and growing resentment. The more I thought about my life, the more I realized how much of myself I had given up for a marriage that was now nothing more than a facade. It was during one of those long, sleepless nights that I made a decision. I couldn't continue living like this, in a marriage devoid of love and respect. I needed to find myself again, to rediscover the Elizabeth who had dreams and aspirations before they were buried under the weight of others' expectations. The morning I told Daniel I was considering a divorce, he laughed. "You'll never leave me, Elizabeth. You need me too much." But he was wrong. I didn't need him. I hadn't needed him for a long time. What I needed was to find myself again, to break free from the chains of a loveless marriage, and so I began to plan my escape, my journey back to myself. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to be Elizabeth Hartman, not just Daniel's wife. The morning I decided to divorce Daniel was clear and bright, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman who had aged beyond her years, worn down by the relentless demands of a thankless marriage. But in my eyes, there was also a flicker of something new, determination. I sat at the kitchen table, the divorce papers in front of me. Daniel had left early, avoiding the confrontation. I signed my name with a steady hand, each stroke a line drawn in the sand, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The divorce process was grueling. Daniel fought me at every turn, unwilling to concede anything, but I stood my ground, fueled by years of suppressed anger and disappointment. In the end, the court granted me a fair settlement, not out of generosity, but out of legal obligation. I remember walking out of the courthouse, the weight of the past 40 years slowly lifting off my shoulders. I was free, but freedom came with its own set of challenges. I had to rebuild my life from scratch, find a place to live, and secure my financial future. I found a small apartment close to my workplace. It was modest, but it was mine. I decorated it with things I loved, each item a reflection of the new life I was building. I started to rediscover the simple joys I had long forgotten, reading a book uninterrupted, taking long walks, and meeting friends for coffee. But the biggest change was in how I saw myself. I was no longer just Daniel's wife, defined by my relationship to a man who had taken me for granted. I was Elizabeth Hartman, an independent woman with her own dreams and desires. As the months passed, I began to feel a sense of peace. The bitterness and anger that had consumed me slowly faded, replaced by a quiet strength. I had survived the worst and come out stronger. I occasionally heard snippets of Daniel's life after our divorce. He struggled to adjust to his new reality, the reality of a man who had lost the woman who had taken care of everything for him. But that was no longer my concern. My focus was on building a life that was fulfilling and joyful, a life that was truly mine. The journey was not easy. There were days when loneliness crept in, when the memories of the past threatened to overwhelm me. But I had learned to be resilient, to find happiness in the smallest things, and to cherish my independence. The divorce marked the end of my marriage to Daniel, but it was also the beginning of my journey to self-discovery. It was a journey of healing, of finding joy in solitude, and of learning to love myself. The first year after the divorce was a time of profound transformation for me. I had stepped out of the shadow of a stifling marriage and was learning to navigate the world on my own terms. Every day brought its challenges, but also its small victories and joys. My new apartment became a sanctuary, a place where I could be myself without judgment or expectation. I filled it with plants, their vibrant greens a stark contrast to the neutral tones of the home I had shared with Daniel. I took pleasure in caring for them, marveling at their growth and resilience, qualities I was beginning to see in myself. I also rediscovered old passions. I had always loved painting, a hobby I had set aside in the busy years of marriage and motherhood. Now I set up a small studio in a corner of my living room, and I spent my evenings lost in the world of colors and forms. It was therapeutic, a way to express the emotions that I had kept bottled up for so long. One of the most significant changes was in my social life. During my marriage, my world had revolved around Daniel and his needs. Now I reached out to old friends, rekindling relationships that had faded over the years. I also made new friends, people who knew me not as Daniel's wife but as Elizabeth Hartman, with my own stories and experiences. I joined a book club, finding delight in discussions that ranged far beyond the pages of the novels we read. I took a cooking class, laughing and learning with a group of strangers who quickly became friends. Each new experience was a step towards rebuilding my identity, piece by piece. Financial independence was another area where I thrived. I had received a fair settlement in the divorce, but I knew I couldn't rely on it forever. I took charge of my finances, learning about investment and savings. I was determined to secure my future, to never again be dependent on someone else for my financial well-being. But perhaps the most profound change was in my relationship with myself. For years, I had defined myself through my roles as a wife and mother. Now I began to see myself as an individual, with my own needs and desires. I learned to enjoy my own company, to cherish the solitude that had once frightened me. I remember one evening, sitting on my balcony, a cup of tea in my hand, watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with oranges and pinks, a breathtaking canvas of nature's beauty. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of contentment, a peace I hadn't known in years. I had come a long way from the scared, uncertain woman who had signed those divorce papers. I had faced my fears, embraced change, and emerged stronger. I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. In the second year after our divorce, news about Daniel began to trickle back to me through mutual acquaintances and unexpected encounters. It seemed that life, after having taken away so much from me, was now showing me a different side, one where karma played its hand. Daniel, who had once carried himself with an air of invincibility, was now a shadow of his former self. His relationship with the younger woman he had left me for had ended disastrously. She, unlike me, had little patience for his dismissive attitude and entitlement. I heard she left him for someone else, leaving Daniel alone and embittered. Financially, Daniel's situation had deteriorated rapidly. The savings he had once boasted about were dwindling. His habits of extravagant spending, which he indulged in during the early days of his newfound freedom, had caught up with him. Without me to manage the finances, he had fallen into debt. I remember feeling a mix of emotions when I first heard about his struggles. There was a part of me that felt vindicated, seeing him face the consequences of his actions, but there was also a sense of sadness, a mourning for the man I had once loved, who had lost his way so completely. Daniel's professional life, too, had taken a hit. His performance at work had suffered during the turmoil of his personal life. Rumors of his unprofessional behavior had spread, and soon he found himself without a job. The pride he had once taken in his career was now replaced by a sense of defeat and hopelessness. The house, which had been a bone of contention during our divorce, was now a burden to him. Without my upkeep, it had fallen into disrepair. The garden, which I had tended to with such care, was now overgrown and wild. The walls needed painting, the roof needed repairs, but Daniel lacked both the resources and the will to tend to them. Occasionally, I would drive past our old house, a pang of nostalgia hitting me as I saw the unkempt lawn and the peeling paint. It was a physical manifestation of Daniel's decline, a stark reminder of how far he had fallen. Despite everything, I found no joy in his misfortune. The years I had spent with him, the love I had once felt, made it impossible for me to completely harden my heart against him. But I also knew that this was his path to walk, his lessons to learn. I had my own journey to focus on, a journey of healing and self-discovery. Daniel's undoing was a stark reminder of how life can change, how the choices we make shape our destiny. It reinforced my resolve to live a life true to myself, a life where I was no longer a bystander, but the author of my own story. The third year after my divorce marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with unexpected joys and the blossoming of new love. It was a time when the wounds of the past began to heal, and I allowed myself to embrace the possibilities of the future. I met John at a community art exhibition. He was a widower, a gentle man with a kind smile and an eye for beauty. Our love for art brought us together, and our conversations flowed effortlessly. He had a way of listening that made me feel heard, truly heard, for the first time in years. John, like me, had experienced loss and heartache. His wife had passed away after a long illness, leaving him to navigate the complexities of life alone. We found solace in each other's company, sharing stories of our pasts and dreams for our futures. Our relationship grew gradually, a slow and steady flame that warmed both our hearts. We spent our days exploring art galleries, attending concerts, and enjoying quiet dinners. With John, I rediscovered the joys of companionship, the simple pleasure of sharing life with someone who understood and appreciated me. The decision to remarry was not one I took lightly. The scars of my marriage with Daniel were still there, a reminder of the pain that love could bring. But with John, it felt different. There was a mutual respect and understanding, a shared desire to support and uplift each other. Our wedding was a small affair, just close friends and family. It was a celebration of new beginnings, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. As I stood beside John, exchanging vows, I felt a sense of wholeness, a feeling that I had come home. Life with John was peaceful and fulfilling. We moved into a new house, one that we chose together, filling it with memories and laughter. He encouraged my passion for painting, and I supported his love for gardening. Together we created a space that was a true reflection of our love. My daughter, Emily, saw the change in me. She was initially hesitant about John, protective of the mother who had been through so much. But as she saw the happiness he brought into my life, her reservations faded. She embraced John as a part of our family, and I watched their bond grow with a heart full of gratitude. John and I traveled, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the opportunity. We explored new places, immersing ourselves in different cultures and experiences. Each journey was an adventure, a chance to see the world through each other's eyes. As I lay in bed each night, John's steady breathing beside me, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I had gone through the depths of despair, faced my fears, and emerged stronger. I had learned to love again, to open my heart to the possibilities of a new beginning. My life with John was a testament to the fact that it's never too late to find happiness, to start anew. It was a reminder that even after the darkest nights, the sun will rise, bringing with it the light of hope and the promise of a new day. As I sat on the porch of our home, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I reflected on the journey that had led me to this moment. Beside me, John held my hand gently, a silent symbol of the companionship and love that had become my new reality. The years following my marriage to John were like a balm to my soul. We had both found in each other a second chance at love, a chance to rewrite our stories with a happier ending. My life, once defined by the shadows of a loveless marriage, was now illuminated by the light of mutual respect and understanding. My relationship with my daughter Emily had blossomed as well. She had grown into a strong, independent woman, much like I had become. Our conversations, once cautious and superficial, were now deep and meaningful. She shared her life with me, her successes and her struggles, and I offered her the wisdom of my experiences, the lessons I had learned from my own journey. The joy of being a grandmother added another layer of happiness to my life. Emily's children, my grandchildren, were a source of endless delight. I saw in them the hope and promise of the future, a continuation of our family's legacy. John, with his kind nature, became a beloved figure in their lives, a testament to the fact that family is not just defined by blood, but by love and choice. Professionally, I had found fulfillment as well. I continued to work, but now on my terms. I pursued projects that interested me, that sparked my creativity and passion. My art, once a hobby pushed to the sidelines, was now a significant part of my life. I held exhibitions, sharing my work with a wider audience, receiving recognition for my talent and vision. In my moments of solitude, I often thought of Daniel. I heard through the grapevine that he lived a solitary life, his pride and choices leading him down a path of isolation. There was no joy in knowing this, only a sense of sadness for what might have been. I hoped that he, too, would find some peace, some lesson in the life he had chosen. As I looked ahead, I saw a future filled with possibilities. John and I had plans to travel, to explore, to experience all that life had to offer. We wanted to make the most of the time we had, to create memories that would last a lifetime. I had learned that life is a series of chapters, each with its own challenges and joys. The key was to embrace each chapter, to learn and grow from the experiences it offered. My past had shaped me, but it did not define me. I was the author of my story, and I had the power to write the ending I desired. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the world, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the love found. My story was one of resilience, of finding strength in adversity, and of the redemptive power of love. And as the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, I knew that my story was far from over. It was just beginning.
"You're terrible at cooking, James. Go freeze outside with your failed meal," she yelled, slamming the window shut and locking it. I hurried to the window, pleading for James to open it as I pounded on the glass, but he just smirked and closed the curtains. The cold started to creep in, and I began to shake. My body, warmed just moments ago from the heater, was quickly losing its heat. What will happen if it stays this cold, even my baby inside me? I was about to faint from the freezing cold when someone suddenly reached out to help. "Are you okay?" The next day, I came back home with him. James was outside, freezing naked. I was stunned at the sight, but Lam stepped forward. "Isn't that what you said? If you can't cook properly, then freeze outside." Lam gave James a stern look and spoke in a cold tone. James, shivering in the yard, could barely muster a response. "I'll call for an ambulance out of kindness, Emily. Do you have anything to save a life before it arrives?" I nodded and stepped closer to James. "My name is Emily Smith. I'm 28 years old and stay at home. When I was working, my mom got sick and passed away. Then my dad suddenly died from a heart problem. I was left all alone since I'm the only child. It was really hard being by myself, but I kept busy with work." "Emily, are you okay? You seem stressed during that tough time." My husband James was there for me. He comforted me when I felt sad and alone. Eventually we fell in love and got married after dating for a few years. "We're so happy to have such a wonderful woman in our family," my in-laws said. "James, you've brought home a great lady." After our wedding, I moved in with James's family and we all got along great. "Emily, I saw a new cafe near the train station on TV. Let's check it out sometime," James suggested. "Sure, I'd love to." I especially bonded with my mother-in-law, and we made it a tradition to go out for a meal once a week. I also connected well with my father-in-law, who enjoys cooking, and we've cooked together in the kitchen a few times. "I'm happy you're getting along with my family, but what about my younger brother? He can be a bit of a handful," James asked. "Oh, he's fine. Liam, my brother-in-law, and I don't talk much because he works from home and stays in his room most of the time. But when I showed interest in his work, he explained it to me in detail. So I've been getting along well." A few years later, I found out I was pregnant with James's child. Because of how bad my morning sickness was, I decided to quit my job. "I think that's a good call. Don't overdo it," James agreed. Deciding to quit wasn't just my choice, I talked it over with James's family. Both James and Liam make enough money for us to live comfortably. I also have savings, and with my father-in-law working and my mother-in-law having a part-time job, quitting my job won't cause any issues. "Wow, pregnant women have it easy. No work, no complaints," someone remarked. Lately, James has been complaining about me not working, but during our discussions about me quitting my job, James was actually the one who suggested it first. "You're just freeloading without a job, acting all high and mighty," he said. "Who's acting high and mighty? I'm the one who always cleans up after you," I retorted. I've always been competitive, so I wanted to prove James wrong. "If you had a problem, you should have spoken up during our discussions. You were the one who brought it up, right?" James retorted. "Instead of complaining, focus on your own responsibility. My parents-in-law agree with me and support my decision." James feels left out. He and Liam don't get along, so Liam never supports James. James looks down on me because I work from home. "He doesn't listen to me and doesn't think I'm helpful," Liam whispered, "which is why he doesn't join our conversations." James doesn't like this. And when we're alone, he complains even more. "Just because my family likes you doesn't mean you should act all high and mighty. I'm not acting that way. Everyone is just being reasonable." Even when it's just the two of us, I never used to lose arguments to James. But when the morning sickness started, I lost the energy to argue. Pregnancy isn't an illness. If you're not working, James thinks you're just lazy. I agree pregnancy isn't an illness, but Emily is putting in a lot of effort to nurture another life. That's hard work in itself, Liam acknowledged. Lam started helping out too. Whenever James complained to me, Lamb would step in and tell his parents, while James got scolded by them. Liam took care of me. At this rate, it's hard to tell who the real father is, I joked, rubbing my belly. With my in-laws keeping an eye on things, I hoped James would eventually change. Until then, I kept trusting him. Oh, James isn't back yet. No, not yet. Suddenly, James started coming home late all the time. He claimed it was because of overtime, but I wasn't sure if that was true. Even on his days off, he'd say he was working late or got called in unexpectedly and wouldn't come home at all. I began to suspect James was cheating, and so did his parents. We tried to gather evidence together, but it was tough to catch him in the act. He always seemed to be at the office, and we couldn't find any evidence of him seeing another woman. Well, we can't really know what's going on inside the company, his parents said. I asked one of his co-workers, but she said everything seemed normal. Hey Emily, take it easy, she told me. My morning sickness got so bad that I couldn't do any housework. But my father-in-law cooked, my mother-in-law helped with other chores, and Liam pitched in, so everything was okay. You should be ashamed of yourself lying around all day, not doing any housework, even though you're a homemaker. Why are you even here? James, who had seen his parents doing chores, woke me up one night just to say that. When I looked upset, Liam replied, "That's rich coming from someone who's not pulling his weight as a husband. Every time you challenge me, even though I'm the eldest." Well, you're not exactly the role model type of brother. You've always been a bit of a know-it-all, Lamb retorted. The argument between the brothers escalated, almost turning physical before their parents stepped in to stop them. After hearing what happened, their parents scolded James saying, "That's enough, do whatever you want." Wait, James, where are you going without talking to me? James left without a word. I'm really sorry about that, we apologize, their parents said to me in place of James, and the situation calmed down. However, James's behavior has been worsening, and something needs to be done soon. I was at a loss for what to do. Is everything okay? One Saturday, my in-laws had planned a trip for a local event. Despite arranging it beforehand, they were worried about leaving me alone due to James's recent behavior. I'm concerned about leaving you, my mother-in-law said. I'll be fine, my morning sickness has eased up a lot, I assured them. They left with concern, and around the same time, Liam had overnight commitments. I'm sorry for leaving at this time, Lamb said. It's okay, take care, I replied. Not long after they left, Lamb also departed. James was unusually at home that day, still asleep. Despite not feeling my best, I decided to get up and do things around the house. I didn't want to risk James's criticism if I stayed idle. Thankfully, my father-in-law had prepared plenty of dishes and stored them in the fridge. I started cleaning and doing laundry, taking it easy on myself. Hey, breakfast! James finally woke up close to noon, still looking grumpy with messy hair. He demanded breakfast, and I rolled my eyes, grabbing some leftovers from the fridge. What's that? Leftovers your dad made you? You can't even cook as a homemaker, James remarked. His comment annoyed me. Why does he say things like this? Doesn't he realize I'm pregnant with his child? There's no excuse for his behavior. Sorry, but right now, my main job is taking care of our baby. Household chores can wait, I retorted. How dare you talk to your husband like that, James shouted at me. But then Liam barged in, breaking the tension. I could hear them arguing loudly outside. You stay out of this, James snapped at Liam before storming off to his room, muttering angrily. As expected, James made a racket and then left the house. Liam let out a heavy sigh. You okay? Lamb asked as he entered the room. Yeah, What brings you here? I replied. I just came to pick up something I forgot, Liam explained, looking at me with concern. It's all right, go ahead. Don't worry about me, I assured him. Okay then, I'll head out, Liam said, hesitating for a moment before leaving. I couldn't help but wonder, where did the James I first met go? At this rate, it seemed like divorce was inevitable, but I still wanted to remain close to my in-laws. Feeling suddenly drained, I decided to lie down, and before I knew it, I fell into a deep sleep. Emily, time to wake up. James's voice interrupted my sleep. I mumbled as I sat up. I met James's eyes, expecting him to scold me. However, he gave me a rare smile. I'm sure I'll get an earful from James later, I thought. I wanted to let you sleep, but it's already evening, James said in a surprisingly gentle tone. I was shocked by his kindness. I've prepared dinner, so when you're ready, come join me, he added before leaving the room. I noticed a blanket over me and couldn't help but wonder if James had covered me. I went to the kitchen and found my father-in-law's dishes already warmed up, ready to eat. I'm sorry, Emily, James said sincerely. When I found out we were having a baby, I was thrilled. But then I got overwhelmed and took it out on you. This cake is my way of apologizing. James presented a cake to me. Honestly, this gesture couldn't erase all the past hurts, but his genuine apology warmed my heart. For now, I decided to forgive him and enjoy our meal together. Look, it's snowing, James exclaimed excitedly. Oh, you're right. Let's go see, I replied, following him to the window. The sight of the snow falling against the night sky was beautiful. Since I came from a place where it rarely snowed, this was a special moment for me. Without hesitation, I moved closer to the window, letting it open. James suggested, but it'll be cold, I protested. Just put on a jacket, he insisted, as he draped one over me and opened the window, letting in the chilly wind. As I braced myself against the cold, James hugged me suddenly. I found myself outside, and when I turned around, I saw James grinning mischievously. You're a homemaker who doesn't do the housework, that makes you a bad wife. Think about that tonight, he teased. Excuse me, what are you saying? You can't even cook, I retorted. With that, James shut and locked the window. I rushed to the window, pleading with James to open it as I pounded on the glass, but he just grinned and closed the curtains. The cold was starting to make me shiver. My body, warm from the heater just moments ago, was rapidly losing its warmth. What am I going to do if this continues? Even my baby inside me. Just as I felt like I might pass out from the cold and shock, someone reached out to me and asked if I was okay. They helped me into their car. Why were you out here at this time of night? It was Liam, who had come home earlier than planned because he was worried about James. The car's heater warmed me up, and I felt relieved. We should go to the hospital just to be safe, Liam suggested as he drove me there. Thanks to his quick action, both my baby and I were okay. While I was being examined, Liam arranged for a hotel where we could stay. He left to take care of something else. I'm so relieved you're going to be a strong baby, right? Feeling reassured, I rubbed my belly. I was grateful that nothing serious had happened. Exhausted, I fell asleep as soon as I lay down on the bed. Oh, Emily, are you feeling better now? Liam asked as we left the hospital. Yes, I'm completely fine now, thank you so much, I replied gratefully. No problem, shall we head home? Liam suggested. The next day as we arrived home, I was shocked to see James freezing naked in the yard. Liam approached him with a cold gaze and tone. This is what you said, right? If you can't cook properly, then freeze outside. James, shivering, couldn't even respond properly. I'll call an ambulance out of kindness. Emily, do you want to say anything to him before it arrives? Liam asked me, nodding. I stepped closer to James. It's because of you that our baby was almost in danger. I will never forgive you. Just wait, I told him firmly. James was taken to the hospital. Later, I asked Liam what happened last night after he dropped me off at the hotel. Liam returned home alone and found James sleeping in the living room naked with another woman who seemed to be his mistress. James had brought her home thinking we wouldn't be there, and with me locked out, he seemed confident. Liam, furious, threw James out of the house in his birthday suit, telling him to think about his actions. Then Liam interrogated the shocked mistress, gathered evidence, and sent her back to her place. It turned out she had a family too. By the time Liam informed them of everything, dawn was approaching. He took a short nap in the car and then came to pick me up. That's how everything unfolded. I've talked to my parents. They said they're coming home today, Liam told me with a gentle smile, staying by my side until they returned. It's going to be okay now, Liam. Thank you so much, I said gratefully. I just did what needed to be done, Liam replied. I'm so sorry, that idiot. I can't apologize enough. James immediately apologized upon their return and faced their wrath. James was forced to pay child support, and it was decided that he would be kicked out. I'm so sorry. It was just a mistake, Emily. I truly love only you, James pleaded, but I ignored him. I wish he'd stop treating me like a fool, I thought to myself. Suddenly, James became aggressive, raising his hand at me. Enough is enough, my dad, Liam, intervened, grabbing and twisting James's arm with the help of my father-in-law. James was easily overpowered, and I felt relieved. I really just lost my mind for a moment, Emily, James said remorsefully as he was thrown out by the two men while I was comforted by my mother-in-law. He was pathetic until the very end, I thought to myself. By the way, Liam's pretty strong, isn't he? Considering what just happened and how he tossed a full-grown man outside, Emily remarked. Oh yeah, he used to do combat sports back in the day. I wouldn't recommend trying that move on just anyone though, Liam said with a smile. Emily felt a flutter in her heart at his smile, and her mother-in-law laughed upon noticing. With such good looks and strength, it's surprising he doesn't have a girlfriend, her mother-in-law teased. Liam bashfully looked away, which Emily found endearing. From then on, Emily decided to stay and be cared for in her in-laws' home since she had no other family or reliable person to turn to. If you'd allow, I'd love to hold your baby, her mother-in-law said. Of course, anytime, Emily replied. Right now the four of us are eagerly awaiting the birth of my precious baby, Emily thought to herself. Talking to Liam, Emily found out that James the jerk was with a junior from his office. No wonder she wouldn't spill the beans when asked, Emily thought. The two of them were sneaking around and getting cozy at various spots. Once I reported it to the junior's husband, he did a thorough investigation. With that evidence, my divorce process went smoothly. Both of them got fired for fooling around during work hours and for claiming their dates as business expenses, Emily recounted. Thank you for all the help, Emily said to Liam. Well, it's only natural to want to help someone you love, right? Liam replied, his face turning beet red. Wait, what? Emily was surprised and both of them blushed. Then Emily found out that Liam had feelings for her for a long time. I always thought I should hide these feelings, Liam confessed. I never imagined he felt that way about me, Emily thought. Honestly, I'm not ready to be in a relationship like that right now, Emily said. I understand, but if you can wait a bit, I want to explore these feelings, Liam said. Emily smiled, and Liam smiled back happily. I'm going to do everything I can to make you see how much I care, Liam declared. Okay, I'll be ready for that, Emily replied. Liam's parents overheard their conversation during dinner, which was really delicious. Looks like Liam has a girlfriend now, his mother teased. Liam blushed and responded playfully. Both his father and I laughed at that, Emily remembered afterward. I gave birth to our lovely daughter right on time, Emily proudly shared. She's so cute, congratulations. She looks just like Emily, adorable, Liam's parents said. I don't want to let her go, Liam said happily, embracing his role as a father. Years later, I happily married Liam again, and our daughter calls him Daddy. Liam adores her, Emily remembered fondly. I think our next child will be a boy, Liam guessed. Yeah, that would be cool if he's like me. But having a boy who looks like you would be awesome too, Liam added. I'm pregnant with our second child now. Our daughter is thrilled about becoming a big sister, Emily said happily. We're all thinking of names together. It seems like our daughter's suggestion might win, Emily laughed. I'm going to make Emily, our daughter, and the new baby happy, Liam promised. Don't forget about yourself in that promise, Emily said with a smile. We're planning to live happily ever after, all 6 of us together, having fun and getting along. That's our plan, Emily included. We can't wait to go out together as a family once the new baby arrives.
It was early morning in Portland, Oregon, when I first began to sense something was off. The city was still quiet, and I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, when David walked in. For once, he was dressed in a suit. I hadn't seen him in anything other than sweatpants and old shirts since he lost his job as an IT specialist a few months back. Big day? I asked, trying to sound casual. David looked up, his face a mask of forced cheerfulness. Yeah, I have a job interview today. Fingers crossed. I smiled, though my mind was already buzzing. It had been a while since we had any news that wasn't just about scraping by. But as I looked at David, something felt uneasy. His sudden enthusiasm felt too rehearsed, too out of place. The day dragged on, and as evening fell, I found myself waiting anxiously for him to come home. When he finally walked through the door, I could tell something was wrong. The sharp scent of alcohol and an unfamiliar perfume clung to him. My heart sank. David stumbled slightly as he hung up his coat, and I could see the disheveled state of his hair and clothes. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my instincts were screaming at me. I had to know what was going on. Later that night, while David was in the shower, I found myself in his study. I hesitated for a moment before picking up his phone. It was a risk, but I needed answers. With shaking hands, I scrolled through his messages, and there it was, a string of texts between David and Rebecca, my closest friend. The messages were intimate and full of promises that I had never heard before. Rebecca was someone I trusted deeply. We had been friends for years, shared countless secrets, and supported each other through thick and thin. And now, here she was, betraying me with my own husband. I felt a cold fury rising inside me, mingled with a sense of betrayal so profound it left me almost numb. David had used my business credit card to buy gifts for Rebecca. There were receipts for luxury items, which I later found stashed in his desk drawer. He had been financing their affair with the money I had earned, money that was supposed to secure our family's future. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Ella, our 8-year-old daughter, was asleep in the next room, unaware of the storm brewing just outside her door. I worried about her, about how this would affect her. She was perceptive, mature for her age. I knew she would sense the tension, and that thought made my heart ache. Weeks passed, and I tried to keep up appearances. I focused on work and Ella's routine, but in the background, I was quietly gathering evidence. I followed David one day and saw him with Rebecca at a high-end store, laughing and shopping together. The sight was a cruel confirmation of what I had already discovered. During this time, my brother Mark came to visit. He had always been my rock, and his presence was a much-needed comfort. Mark was completely unaware of the affair. He had come to help with Ella while I juggled work and the emotional turmoil. One evening, while Mark was playing with Ella, I took the opportunity to confront David. My hands trembled as I spoke, but I needed him to know that I was no longer in the dark. David, still in denial, tried to deflect, but I had already seen too much. Ella knows something is wrong, I said, my voice breaking. She's been talking to Mark. She's worried. David's face paled, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But then he masked it with anger. You're overreacting. It's not what you think. But I knew the truth, and as painful as it was, I had to protect Ella. The holidays were approaching, and I decided it was time to take action. With Mark's help, I began packing up our things. The plan was to move to a new home with Ella and start fresh. The night before David was supposed to leave for a getaway with Rebecca, I knew I had to confront him one last time. I was determined, resolute. I had to find a way to end this chapter of my life and ensure that Ella and I could move forward, free from the shadows of betrayal that had loomed over us for too long. The suspense was unbearable, but the truth was clear. It was time for a new beginning. The days that followed my discovery were filled with a constant, gnawing anxiety. I kept everything on a tight leash, trying to maintain normalcy for Ella's sake. Meanwhile, the plan to leave David was taking shape, and I couldn't wait for the right moment to put it into action. The night before David was set to leave for his getaway with Rebecca, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I knew I had to confront him about the affair. The truth couldn't stay hidden any longer, and I needed him to know that I was fully aware of his betrayal. As David came home that evening, I could see he was excited about the trip. His bags were packed, and he was chattering about how much fun he expected to have. I tried to keep my composure, though inside, my emotions were a tangled mess. Are you sure you don't need anything else? I asked, trying to sound casual. David barely looked up. Nope, I think I'm all set. Can you make sure Ella's in bed by the time I leave? I nodded, fighting the urge to reveal what I knew. As he busied himself with last-minute preparations, I made my way to the bedroom where I had hidden all the evidence, receipts, messages, and records of his lavish spending on Rebecca. When David was finally ready to leave, I knew it was time. I took a deep breath and called him into the living room. David, we need to talk. His face tightened with a mix of irritation and curiosity. What's this about? I sat down, feeling the weight of my next words. I know about you and Rebecca. I know you've been using my business credit card to pay for things for her. I saw the messages on your phone, and I followed you the other day. David's expression shifted from annoyance to shock. Jessica, Save it, I interrupted. I've seen enough. I don't need any more excuses. I'm done with this. His face flushed with a mixture of guilt and anger. You don't understand. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I thought. No, I said firmly. You made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences. David tried to backpedal, offering hollow apologies and justifications. Please, Jess, don't do this. I was going to end things with Rebecca. I just needed more time. I shook my head. It's too late for that. Ella's already noticed that something's wrong. I can't let her be exposed to this any longer. His eyes widened in alarm. Ella knows. Yes, I said, my voice steady. She's been asking questions and talking to my brother. She knows enough to understand that something is deeply wrong. David slumped into a chair, clearly defeated. What are you going to do? I'm moving out, I said. Tomorrow. I've already made arrangements with Mark. We're going to start over. David's face was a mix of panic and desperation. Can't we work this out? I'll get help. I'll do whatever it takes. I shook my head. No, David. This is over. I've made up my mind. With that, I stood up and walked towards the bedroom. I could hear David's frustrated mutterings as I left, but I didn't turn back. I had to remain strong, not just for myself, but for Ella. That night, while David sulked in the guest room, I went to bed with a heavy heart. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to take control of my life. The following day, Mark arrived early to help with the move. He had a look of quiet resolve as he packed up our belongings, his presence a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Ella, oblivious to the full extent of what was happening, was busy with her toys, her innocent laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil unfolding around her. David tried to reach out to me multiple times during the day, pleading and bargaining, but I remained resolute. I had deactivated my business credit card and made sure to secure our finances before David could get his hands on any more of my money. By evening, the house was almost empty. Mark and I had packed up everything we needed and were ready to leave. David, still furious and desperate, tried to stop us, but I refused to be swayed. As I packed the last of Ella's things into the car, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. This chapter of my life was closing, and though it was painful, it was also a step towards a new beginning. The confrontation had been tough, but it was necessary. As we drove away from our old home, I glanced in the rearview mirror, my heart heavy but hopeful. I was leaving behind the pain and betrayal, determined to start fresh and build a better future for Ella and me. The first few days after moving out were a whirlwind of emotions and logistics. Mark and I found a cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood of Portland, one that felt like a fresh start. It was a far cry from the home we'd left behind, but it had a warmth and simplicity that I hoped would ease the transition for Ella. The day after we moved in, David's calls and messages started pouring in. Each one was a mixture of desperation and anger. He wanted to know why I'd cut him off financially and demanded to see Ella. I couldn't bear to see him or hear his voice, so I ignored his calls and focused on making our new place feel like home. Mark was a huge help, handling the heavy lifting and keeping things calm. He made sure Ella felt comfortable and secure in her new environment, setting up her room and playing with her. His presence was a source of strength, and I was grateful for his support during this difficult time. Despite the chaos, I tried to keep Ella's routine as normal as possible. I enrolled her in a new school nearby and started to introduce her to the neighborhood. She was adjusting well, but I could tell she missed the familiarity of her old life. I tried to reassure her with extra cuddles and bedtime stories, doing everything I could to keep her spirits up. A few weeks after the move, I received an unexpected call from Rebecca. It was late one evening, and I was tucking Ella into bed when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Jessica, it's Rebecca," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "I need to talk to you." "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm angry, Jessica," she said. "David's things were sent to my house, and now my husband knows everything. We're getting a divorce." "You made sure of that." I could hear the hurt and anger in her voice, and a part of me felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, Rebecca. But you and David made your choices. I had to protect myself and Ella." Rebecca's voice softened slightly. "I didn't expect David to drag me into all this. I was hoping we could figure things out. But now everything is falling apart." I could tell she was struggling, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of empathy. "I hope you find a way to move forward. It's not easy for any of us." We ended the call shortly after, leaving me with a sense of mixed emotions. While I felt justified in my actions, the reality of the situation was sobering. Rebecca was dealing with her own fallout, and the mess David had created was affecting more lives than just ours. As days turned into weeks, the complications continued. David kept calling and sending messages, each more frantic than the last. He threatened legal action, claiming I was depriving him of his parental rights. I was prepared for such threats and had consulted a lawyer to ensure that Ella's well-being was legally protected. One afternoon, while I was working from home, my lawyer called with an update. "Jessica, I've reviewed David's claims. He's trying to contest the custody arrangements, but given the circumstances and his recent behavior, it's unlikely he'll succeed." I breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you for handling this. I just want to focus on Ella and give her a stable environment. That's the right approach, my lawyer assured me. Keep documenting everything and we'll get through this. Despite the legal battles, life slowly began to settle into a new routine. Ella and I attended local events, made new friends, and started to find our rhythm. I continued working hard at my job, determined to keep my career on track while providing for my daughter. One evening, as I was finishing up some paperwork, Mark came by for a visit. He brought dinner and, more importantly, a reassuring presence. "How's everything going?" he asked, setting down the bags of food. "Busy but manageable," I replied. "Ella seems to be settling in well. I think she's finally starting to feel more at home here." Mark smiled. "That's good to hear. I'm glad you're making progress." As we sat down to eat, I reflected on the journey so far. The confrontation with David had been necessary, but it had set off a chain reaction of challenges and adjustments. I was navigating a new life, one that was filled with uncertainties, but also with hope. The holidays were approaching, and I was determined to make them special for Ella. We decorated our apartment with festive lights and ornaments, creating a cozy and cheerful atmosphere. I wanted her to have a sense of joy and normalcy during this time of transition. As the season changed and the new year approached, I felt a cautious optimism. The road ahead would still have its hurdles, but I was ready to face them head-on. With Mark's support and my determination, I was building a new foundation for Ella and me, one step at a time. The aftermath of David's betrayal had been challenging, but it was also a time of growth and resilience. I was learning to navigate this new chapter in my life, committed to providing a better future for my daughter while standing strong in the face of adversity. As the new year began, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The legal issues were gradually settling down, and the apartment was becoming more like home with each passing day. Ella was adjusting well, and I was determined to make sure our lives were as stable and happy as possible. David's calls had become less frequent, and I had managed to cut off all financial ties with him. I had made it clear that I would no longer entertain any discussions about reconciliation or financial support. It was time for both of us to move on. The focus now was on rebuilding our lives and finding a sense of normalcy. One afternoon, I received an unexpected letter from David's lawyer. It was an official notice of his intent to contest the custody arrangement. My heart sank as I read the words, feeling a wave of anxiety. I had hoped we could avoid further legal battles, but it seemed David was determined to fight. I immediately contacted my lawyer to discuss the situation. "Jessica, don't worry," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "We've anticipated this move. We have strong evidence of your commitment to Ella's well-being, and the court will take that into account." Despite her reassurance, the process was draining. I spent countless hours gathering documents, reviewing records, and preparing for the court hearings. Mark remained my rock throughout this ordeal, offering emotional support and practical help. He attended meetings with me and helped care for Ella, making sure I could focus on the legal aspects of the case. The court hearings were tense and emotionally charged. David's lawyer argued that I was trying to deprive him of his parental rights, but I presented my evidence showing that my primary concern was Ella's stability and well-being. I highlighted David's past behavior and the negative impact it had on our family. During one particularly difficult hearing, David took the stand. He looked worn and defeated, and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of sadness and relief. As he spoke, it became clear that his attempts to justify his actions were falling short. The court saw through his attempts to manipulate the situation. The turning point came when the judge ruled in my favor, affirming the custody arrangement and recognizing my commitment to providing a stable environment for Ella. I felt a profound sense of relief as the decision was announced. It was a victory, but it was also a reminder of the hard road we had traveled. With the custody issue resolved, I turned my focus back to rebuilding our lives. Ella and I continued to settle into our new routine, and I worked hard to create a positive environment for her. We started participating in local activities, joined a community center, and made new friends. One evening, as Ella and I decorated for the next holiday, she looked up at me with a bright smile. "Mom, I really like our new home. It feels so warm and happy." My heart swelled with pride and relief. "I'm glad, sweetheart. I want us to be happy and to make the most of this new chapter in our lives." Ella hugged me tightly, and in that moment, I knew we had made it through the toughest part. Despite the challenges and heartbreak, we were moving forward and finding our own path to happiness. As for David and Rebecca, their lives continued to unravel. Rebecca's marriage had ended, and David struggled with the consequences of his actions. They faced their own set of difficulties, but that was no longer my concern. My focus was on Ella and building a future that was full of hope and possibility. The final months of the year brought a sense of closure and renewal. I finalized the divorce, secured child support, and continued to advance in my career. The apartment was now a place of comfort and security, a symbol of our new beginning. Looking back, I could see how far we had come. The journey had been painful and challenging, but it had also been a period of profound growth and resilience. I had learned to stand up for myself and protect what mattered most. Through the heartbreak and adversity, I had found a renewed sense of self-respect and determination. As I tucked Ella into bed one night, I reflected on our journey. "We've been through a lot, haven't we?" Ella nodded sleepily. "Yeah, but we're doing great, Mom. I love our new life." I kissed her goodnight and smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. We had faced the storms and come out stronger. The future was still uncertain, but it was full of promise and opportunity. With Ella by my side and the support of those who cared for us, I knew we were ready for whatever came next. The past was behind us, and the future was ours to shape. As I closed the door to her room, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that we had truly begun a new chapter in our lives.
"James, why did you sell my car without even asking me?" I stood in our brightly lit kitchen, gripping the edge of the countertop. James was lounging on the couch, phone in hand, barely looking up as I spoke. "Emma, I told you last week. We needed the money," James replied casually. His voice was indifferent, almost bored. "The money? For what?" My voice was rising, my patience wearing thin. "For the new entertainment system. You saw how outdated the old one was. We deserved an upgrade," James said with a shrug, his eyes glued to a video on his phone. "That car was important to me, James. It wasn't just about the money. It was mine." My voice cracked, and I took a deep breath, remembering my grandmother's advice to keep my inheritance secret. I never thought I'd need to follow it so strictly. James finally looked up, his expression a mix of irritation and nonchalance. "Come on, Emma, it's just a car. We can get you another one later." I shook my head, frustration boiling over. "You didn't even bother to ask me. This isn't just about the car, James. It's about respect and consideration. You can't just make decisions like this on your own." Our suburban home, usually a tranquil retreat, now felt stifling and alien. The neighborhood outside was quiet, with children playing in front yards and neighbors chatting over fences. To the outside world, we were just another happy couple in a tight-knit community. But inside, the cracks were growing deeper every day. James finally set his phone down and stood up, walking towards me. "Emma, you're overreacting. It's not like we're broke. I'll buy you another car. End of discussion." His dismissive tone cut through me like a knife. I looked at him, searching for the man I'd married, the man who had once been attentive and kind. But all I saw was a stranger, someone who was slowly bleeding me dry of patience and trust. End of discussion? I repeated, incredulous. You can't just dictate how this goes, James. You've crossed a line, and you don't even see it. James's eyes narrowed. What's really going on here, Emma? You've been acting distant for months. Is there something you're not telling me? I took a step back, realization dawning. My grandmother's advice echoed in my mind. Now, more than ever, I understood why she had been so adamant. Protecting my inheritance wasn't about the money itself. It was about keeping control over something that was truly mine, especially when everything else seemed to be slipping away. I don't know, James. Maybe it's because you've stopped caring about what's important to me, I said quietly. Or maybe it's because you think you can just bulldoze through this marriage, making decisions that suit only you. James scoffed, shaking his head. You're being dramatic. I'm just trying to improve our lives. Your life, I corrected. Improving your life at my expense. He didn't respond, just stared at me with a mixture of frustration and confusion. I realized then that he truly didn't see the problem, or maybe he didn't want to. Either way, it was clear that something had to change, and fast. As James turned back to his phone, dismissing the conversation, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I wasn't going to be sidelined in my own life. Grandma's wisdom was a guiding light, and it was time I started listening to it more carefully. Tension hung heavily in the air as I walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding. One thing was certain. I wasn't going to let James's betrayal define me. This was only the beginning, and I had my own plans to make. Claire, I don't know what to do anymore, I said, dropping onto her couch. The floral print cushions smelled faintly of lilac. Claire looked up from her magazine, instantly concerned. Emma, what happened? Did James do something again? I sighed heavily, running my fingers through my hair. He sold my car without even asking me, just traded it for some stupid entertainment system. Claire's eyes widened in shock. Seriously? Who sells someone's car without asking? That's insane. Yes, and he acted like it wasn't a big deal, just brushed it off like I was overreacting. My voice wavered as I recounted the morning's confrontation. He's been doing this for a while now, hasn't he? Claire asked softly. I nodded. It didn't start this way. When we first got together, he was so kind, so attentive. I felt like I was the center of his universe. But now, I let the sentence hang, unfinished. Claire squeezed my hand reassuringly. Have you thought about leaving him? You don't have to stay in a situation like this, Emma. I bit my lip, hesitating. I have, but it's complicated. We've built a life together, and it's not easy to just walk away. Claire's face was etched with concern. You have to do what's best for you. Always remember that. Later that evening, as I cleaned up the dinner dishes James had left behind, I started thinking about the early days of our relationship. I remembered the picnics in the park, the surprise weekend getaways. He used to plan everything so meticulously, making sure every moment was special. But that James was long gone, replaced by someone who seemed to care more about his gadgets and parties than about me. While scrubbing the last of the pots, I noticed the flashy new entertainment system taking up half the living room. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through James's social media. My heart sank when I saw the photos of his recent parties, extravagant and filled with friends I barely knew. Numerous gadgets cluttered our home, all bought with the money he got from selling my car. I fumed silently, deciding to confront him again when he came home. The door creaked open as James stumbled in, the smell of alcohol clinging to him. James, where have you been? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed drunkenly. Out with the guys, needed a break, you know? I took a deep breath. I saw the photos, all those expensive gadgets and parties. Is that where the money from my car went? James looked at me, his eyes unfocused. Come on, Emma. Don't start with this again. It's just stuff. We're having fun. Fun without considering my feelings? I snapped. This is beyond disrespectful, James, that you're ignoring everything I care about. James rolled his eyes, slumping into the couch. Why don't you ever chill out? You used to be fun. Tears of frustration stung my eyes. This isn't about fun, James. It's about you taking everything I care about and tossing it aside. He didn't respond, eyes already closing as he passed out on the couch. The sound of his snoring filled the room, but it couldn't drown out the anger and hurt simmering in my chest. I stood there for a moment, looking at the man who once promised to cherish me. Claire's words echoed in my mind. Maybe it was time to make a change, to find the strength Grandma had always believed I had. This betrayal wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of something new, and I was ready to fight for the life I deserved. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, phone in hand. I needed to talk to my parents. I dialed my mom's number and waited. "Emma, sweetheart, how are you?" My mom answered, her voice warm and comforting. "Mom, things with James, they're worse than ever," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, honey, what happened?" she asked, her tone immediately concerned. I quickly explained the car situation and James's ongoing disregard for my feelings. "I'm considering divorce, Mom. I can't do this anymore." There was a pause on the line. "Emma, we've always supported you, no matter what. Your father and I will help you through this. And remember, you have your inheritance." "I know, Mom. I might need to use it to move out and start over," I admitted, feeling a small twinge of relief saying it out loud. "We'll support you, darling. Do what you need to do," she assured me. As I ended the call, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. It was time to take action. I started drafting an email to a lawyer, seeking advice on the next steps for divorce and considering apartments in a nearby town. After a few hours, I felt more determined than ever. That evening, I kept my phone close, anticipating a reply from the lawyer. As I sat on the couch, James entered the room, eyes suspicious. "What have you been doing all day?" he asked, his tone accusatory. "Just sorting some things out," I replied, keeping my answers vague. James eyed my phone. "Who were you talking to earlier?" "Mom, I needed some advice," I said, avoiding his gaze. Before I knew it, James snatched my phone from my hand. "What the hell, James? Give it back!" I yelled, lunging after him. He scrolled through my messages, his face darkening. "Thinking about leaving me, huh?" His voice was laced with anger. "Give me my phone, James, now." My voice was firm, even though my heart was pounding. James's eyes flashed dangerously. "You think you can just run away with that little inheritance of yours? Everything should go to us, not just you. You've been hiding it all this time?" My mind raced. "I didn't have to tell you everything. That money was meant to give me security." "You're gonna use it to get away from me?" He spat, stepping closer. I stood my ground. "Yes, James, if that's what it takes. I'm done." He threw the phone on the couch, stepping back, but his expression was still livid. "You won't get far with that money. You owe me, Emma. We're in this together." "We were in this together, James. You're the one who turned it into something else," I said coldly. James stared at me, seething, before storming out of the room, slamming the door behind him. My hands were shaking, but I felt a rush of determination. This couldn't go on any longer. I had my plan. I was going to make it out of this mess one way or another. The email dinged, signaling a new message from the lawyer. I quickly opened it and read through the advice, solidifying my resolve. It was time to take the next step. I packed a small bag with essentials, calling Claire to give her a heads up. She answered on the first ring. "Claire, can I stay with you for a while? I'm leaving tonight." "Emma, of course. Come right over. We'll figure this out together," Claire said, her voice unwavering. Grabbing my bag, I took one last look around the house that had become more a prison than a home. Then I walked out the door and didn't look back. I arrived at Claire's house, still gripping the small suitcase. Claire opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a tight hug. "You did the right thing, Emma," she whispered. "Thanks, Claire," I replied, stepping inside. We sat down in her living room, the warm ambiance a stark contrast to the cold tension I'd left behind. "So what's the plan?" Claire asked, handing me a cup of tea. "I contacted a lawyer. Tomorrow I'll start looking for a new place and a job. I need to be independent, both emotionally and financially," I explained, taking a sip. Claire nodded. "You know you can stay here as long as you need to. We've got this." The next morning, I woke up early, ready to tackle my to-do list. Claire drove me around town, helping me check out apartments. We found a cozy one-bedroom that felt just right. I put down a deposit and scheduled a move-in date. Later, I sat at Claire's kitchen table, laptop open, applying for jobs. The task was tedious but necessary. It wasn't long before emails and phone calls started coming in. By evening, I had lined up several interviews. As I celebrated these small victories with Claire, my phone rang. It was James. My heart raced, but I answered. "Emma, where are you?" he demanded, his tone aggressive. "That's none of your business," I said, trying to stay calm. "It is my business. We're married. You can't just walk out," he barked. "I had to. You left me no choice," I replied firmly. James scoffed. "You think you're brave now, hiding at Claire's? This is our problem, not hers. Tell me where you are." "I'm not hiding, and it's not just Claire's problem. I'm done being treated like I don't matter," I said, my voice steady. "You owe me, Emma. For the mortgage, the bills, everything. You think you can just run off with your inheritance and leave me to deal with everything?" His desperation was palpable. "This isn't about money, James. It's about respect, or your lack of it," I said, tears filling my eyes. "You'll regret this, Emma," he hissed before hanging up. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. Claire looked at me, concern etched on her face. "He won't stop, will he?" she said softly. "Not easily," I admitted, steeling myself. The next few days flew by in a blur of apartment preparations and job interviews. I felt stronger each day, my resolve hardening. One evening, while I was organizing my new apartment, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from James. "You're making a huge mistake. You'll come crawling back. They always do." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. I typed back quickly. "No, James, I'm done crawling. This is my life now." I hit send and blocked his number. Standing by the window, I watched the sun setting over my new neighborhood, feeling a sense of freedom. The next morning, I went to my first job interview. Walking into the office, I was greeted by a friendly receptionist who led me through the process. The interview went well, and I left feeling hopeful. Returning to my new apartment, I found Claire waiting with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "To new beginnings," she toasted, handing me a glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking glasses. As we sat and talked, I realized I was beginning to reclaim my life. Each step forward was a step away from James and his toxic influence. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about all I'd left behind and everything that lay ahead. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. A week later, I got the call offering me the job. I smiled, tears of joy streaming down my face. It was a sign that I was on the right path. I was building a new life, one step at a time, and it was a life where I mattered. The town's annual fair was in full swing. Kids sprinted between booths, their laughter mingling with the cheerful hum of the crowd. I was helping Claire set up her jewelry stall when I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Emma," Jack's familiar voice greeted me. He was a mutual friend, someone dependable who'd always been kind. "Oh, hey, Jack, how's it going?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Pretty good. But hey, I heard about you and James. Are you okay?" Jack's concern was evident. I sighed. "It's been rough, but I'm getting through it." Jack nodded, but his face turned cautious. "Speaking of James, he's here. And, well, he isn't handling things well." Before I could ask what he meant, a loud commotion drew our attention. James was in the middle of the fairground, visibly intoxicated, shouting at a group of young men gathered around a barbecue pit. "Oh no," I whispered, feeling my stomach knot. "Hey, it's none of your business!" James yelled, pushing one of the men. The crowd's murmur grew louder, eyes turning toward the spectacle. I took a deep breath. I need to handle this. "Emma, are you sure?" Claire asked, worry etched on her face. "I have to," I replied, squaring my shoulders and weaving through the crowd. As I approached, James spotted me and stumbled over. "Emma, there you are. Thought you could avoid me forever?" He slurred, his breath reeking of alcohol. "James, you're making a scene. Let's talk somewhere else," I urged, trying to stay calm. He laughed bitterly. "Why? So you can walk out again? You think you're so much better now?" "James, you're drunk. This isn't the place," I said firmly. "Everyone should know how you abandoned your husband," James shouted, his voice carrying over the crowd. I could feel the eyes of the townsfolk on us, the whispers spreading like wildfire. Anger and embarrassment churned inside me, but I wouldn't let him drag me back down. "James, we're done. You need to accept that," I said, my voice steady. "Now please, go home before you make this worse." "Worse? You think this can get worse?" His eyes were wild, unhinged. "You owe me, Emma. You can't just walk away without paying your dues." "I don't owe you anything, James. I'm done being your pawn," I replied, stepping back as he moved closer. A friend intervened, grabbing James by the arm. "Come on, man. Let's get you out of here." James struggled but was eventually pulled away, his furious eyes locked on mine. "You're going to regret this, Emma." As he was dragged off, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Claire appeared by my side, her hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "Yes, it had to be done," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. We continued setting up the stall, the mood around us slowly returning to normal. But I noticed several sympathetic looks from people who'd witnessed the altercation. Hours passed and the fair wore on, becoming a blur of faces and activities. That evening, after packing up, I drove to my new apartment. Walking in, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. I was finally free of James's constant manipulation, even if the road ahead was still uncertain. I spent the next few days settling in, gradually feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. One morning, I walked over to the mirror in my new bedroom and caught my reflection. There was a spark in my eyes, one that had been missing for a long time. This was my life, my space, and my chance to rebuild. The memory of James's public meltdown was still fresh, but it only fueled my resolve. I was moving forward, and nothing he did would pull me back. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. Today was just another step, and step by step I was reclaiming my future. One morning, a week after the fair, I was getting ready for my first day at the new job when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jack. "Emma, can we meet up? There's something you need to know about James." My curiosity piqued. I agreed to meet him at the local coffee shop after work. The day passed quickly, filled with training and meeting new colleagues. By evening, I felt both exhausted and exhilarated. At the coffee shop, Jack was already waiting with 2 drinks. He waved me over, his expression serious. "Thanks for coming, Emma," he said, sliding one of the cups over to me. "No problem, Jack. What's going on?" I asked, taking a sip. Jack took a deep breath. "James lost his job, the company downsized, and he was let go." I blinked in surprise. "I didn't know that. He hasn't contacted me since the fair." "Yeah, he's not taking it well," Jack continued. "He's been telling people you left him at the worst possible time, trying to play the victim, but there's more." I leaned in, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" "He's planning something, Emma. He told a mutual friend he's going to try to win you back so he can get his hands on your inheritance." Anger flared inside me. "He really thinks he can manipulate me again?" Jack nodded. "He's desperate, Emma. You need to be careful." "Thanks for the warning, Jack. I'll stay vigilant," I said, my resolve hardening. As I walked back to my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. James losing his job changed things, making him more unpredictable. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside, my mind racing. I needed to be prepared for whatever scheme he cooked up. The next few days were a whirlwind of work and settling into my new routine. One evening, as I was organizing my closet, there was a knock at the door. I hesitated, peering through the peephole. It was James. "Emma, open up. We need to talk," he called, his voice shaky. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door slightly, leaving the chain on. "What do you want, James?" He looked disheveled, clearly stressed. "Emma, I'm sorry for everything. I've lost my job. I need your help." "You need my help," I repeated, incredulous. "After everything you've done?" "Please, Emma, we can work this out. Think about what we had," he pleaded, trying to sound genuine. "What we had, James, is over. You made sure of that," I replied firmly. His demeanor shifted, his eyes flashing with anger. "You can't leave me like this. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," I said, slamming the door shut and locking it. I could hear James banging on the door, shouting, but I leaned against it, breathing deeply. After a few minutes, the banging stopped, and I heard him leave. I checked the peephole to make sure he was gone before calling Claire. "Emma, what's wrong?" she asked, hearing the panic in my voice. James showed up at my apartment. "He's acting desperate and unhinged," I explained. "Stay calm, Emma. You need to protect yourself." "Consider getting a restraining order," Claire suggested. "I'll look into it." "Thanks, Claire," I said, feeling a bit more anchored after talking to her. The next morning, I called the lawyer to discuss my options. He advised me to document everything and start the process for a restraining order. I followed his advice, keeping a log of every interaction with James. Days turned into weeks, and I focused on building my new life. One afternoon, While taking a break at work, I saw a familiar face across the street. It was James, watching me. My heart pounded, but I straightened my shoulders and continued with my day. This was my life now, my chance to be free. No matter how desperate James became, I wasn't going back. This was about reclaiming my future, and I was determined not to let him take that away from me. The moment I stepped out of my building, I saw James sitting on a bench across the street. His eyes locked onto mine, and he stood up, walking towards me. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered under my breath. I quickened my pace, determined not to engage with him, but he caught up to me before I could reach the corner. "Emma, wait," James called out, reaching for my arm. I yanked my arm away, anger flaring. "What do you want, James? I've told you it's over." "Just hear me out," he pleaded, desperation clear in his voice. "I've been trying to get back on my feet, but it's been hard without you. We can make this work again." I stared at him, incredulous. "You really think I'd come back after everything? You manipulated, lied, and used me. There's nothing left to fix." James looked around, a flicker of anger passing over his face. "We were married, Emma. That means working through the tough times." "I did work through the tough times, James, alone, while you partied and spent money you didn't have," I shot back, feeling a rush of righteous indignation. A passerby slowed down, eyes widening at the commotion, but I stood my ground. The whole world might as well know what I've been through. James's posture shifted from pleading to confrontational. "You want people to think I'm the bad guy? You've been hiding money, living this new life while I'm struggling." "Living this new life isn't easy, but it's necessary," I said, trying to keep calm. "I need peace, James, something you can't seem to offer." His eyes darkened. "You think you're better than me now?" "No, James. I think I deserve better than how you treated me," I replied, turning to walk away. James grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. "This isn't over, Emma. You're not getting rid of me that easily." "Get your hands off me," I yelled, drawing the attention of more bystanders. James's grip loosened, but the venom in his eyes remained. A tall man in a suit stepped forward. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, eyeing James warily. "Yes, thank you," I answered quickly. "I was just leaving." James glared at the man, but took a step back. "This isn't over," he repeated, his voice low and threatening. Ignoring his parting words, I hurried away, my heart pounding. This encounter couldn't scare me into submission. It only made me more resolute. Back at my apartment, I immediately called my lawyer. "James is stalking me. I need to escalate this. What are my options?" "We can file for a restraining order immediately," he replied. "Document today's incident in detail and we'll proceed." Hours later, while I completed the necessary paperwork, a sense of empowerment washed over me. Finally, action was being taken to protect my newfound peace. The next week passed without incident until I received a call from an unknown number. My heart sank when I heard his voice again. "Emma, you think a piece of paper will keep me away? You have no idea what I'm capable of," James hissed before the line went dead. Trembling with a mix of fear and fury, I called the police and reported the threat, adding it to the growing case against him. This pattern of intimidation and control would end here. A day later, Claire called me with surprising news. "Emma, people are talking. They know about James's behavior. He's losing friends and support left and right." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of vindication. "He's finally getting what he deserves." As I hung up, I felt an unexpected wave of relief. James's grip on my life was weakening. The community was seeing his true colors, just as I had. I stood by the window, looking out at the bustling evening street below. My journey towards freedom was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. James's fall from grace had begun, and I was reclaiming my future one step at a time. Weeks had passed, and life was slowly returning to a semblance of normal. I was flourishing at my new job, finding satisfaction in the work and camaraderie with my colleagues. Evenings were filled with laughter and support from Claire, who had become my rock. One afternoon, I was engrossed in crafting a presentation when my phone buzzed. It was from Jack. "Hey, Emma, are you free to meet for coffee later? Something you should know." My curiosity piqued, I agreed. We met at the little cafe by my office. Jack was already there, looking concerned. "Emma, thanks for meeting me," he greeted, gesturing to the seat across from him. "No problem, Jack. What's going on?" I asked, sitting down. "It's about James." He's not doing well. He's been trying to get people to turn against you, but it's backfiring. People see him for what he is now, Jack explained. Relief washed over me. Good, he needs to face the consequences. But there's more. James got into some trouble with the law. Drunk driving. He's lost even more support, Jack continued. I nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and pity. Thanks for telling me, Jack. I needed to hear that. After our coffee, I decided to take a walk through the park. The cool breeze and the rustling of leaves felt liberating. It was here I bumped into James, looking disheveled and defeated. He didn't see me at first, but when he did, his eyes darkened. Well, look who it is, he said, his voice dripping with bitterness. James, please. I don't want any trouble, I replied, keeping my distance. You've ruined everything for me, Emma. You and your lies, he spat, his face contorting with anger. Lies, James? The only person who ruined your life is you. Your actions have consequences, I retorted. He took a shaky step closer. Consequences? I've lost everything. My respect, friends, all because of you. I stood my ground. No, James, it's because of your choices. I simply refuse to be your victim anymore. His expression wavered, a flicker of desperation in his eyes. You think you're free of me? This isn't over. Before he could say anything more, 2 police officers approached. Mr. Miller? One of them asked. James turned, his bravado melting away. Yes? You're under arrest for violating the restraining order. You were warned to stay away from Ms. Miller, the officer said, pulling out handcuffs. James's face turned pale. Emma, you can stop this. Tell them it's a mistake, he pleaded, panic in his voice. I shook my head. No, James, this ends now. The officers led him away, and I stood there, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was truly over. Returning to my apartment that evening, I found a letter in the mail. Opening it, I discovered I had been approved for a higher position at work, a promotion. It felt like the universe was giving me a sign that I was on the right path. I called Claire to share the good news, and she was ecstatic. We celebrated with a small dinner at my place, toasting to new beginnings and the end of a dark chapter. That night, I took a moment to reflect on my journey. From the betrayal that shattered my world to the steps I took to rebuild it. I had found strength I didn't know I possessed and had reclaimed my life piece by piece. Walking through the bustling streets the next day, I felt lighter. The weight of past traumas was lifting, replaced by a sense of empowerment and hope. I deserved this new life. A life where my worth was not dictated by someone else's whims. As I turned a corner, I caught a glimpse of someone familiar. James, disheveled and on the edge, standing outside a convenience store, clearly struggling. Our eyes briefly met, but there was no connection left. I walked on, a silent resolve in my heart. James's downfall was complete. My future, bright and full of possibilities, was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time.